Welcome back into another episode of the Better Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Will Ty. You can follow me on Twitter at WillTyFF. So pumped to bring you this awesome episode today with our good friend, Steve Rippey, owner and operator over at Fantasy Guides. You can check them out on Instagram at Fantasy Guides, easily one of my favorite accounts on the gram to follow for awesome analysis, great visual content, and then they also have their podcast that comes out every Tuesday. Steve, what's going on, my man?
Not much, buddy. Thank you so much for having me. The one thing we talk about a lot on my podcast is weather, because the weather here is always up and down, and we finally have good weather. So I've been wearing shorts for the last week, and I'm ecstatic about it. Yeah, I don't know about you up in Cleveland. I don't know what it's like up there, but
I mean, look, it's as miserable as it can get. It's 40, it's 40 degrees and raining. So like either figure it out. Either like go down and snow, or go up and don't be 40 degrees. So, but it's all good. I'm glad to be inside. I'm fortunate to have a nice house. So, I'm happy.
There you go. I like it.
So really pumped, dude. We're going to talk about rookie wide receivers. The NFL draft is now behind us. And so we have a good sense of, what these guys might be from a dynasty perspective. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today, sort of the guys as prospects, but then also now we know their landing spots. So really excited to talk about them. Just curious off the top, like what'd you think of the draft? Was it did you enjoy it? Did you have a fun time watching it?
Yeah, I had a great time. So my two co-hosts, my brother Casey, and one of my really good friends Jesse, who I went to college with, and he used to play college football. We do our podcast, and we set some time aside to go kind of work from a brewery here in Colorado where I live, and it was a blast. I was trying to update my rankings on my website while watching the draft, and this is probably the last year I'll do that, because you think when you're watching the draft, it feels like it's slow with the picks coming in, but when you're trying to update player avatars and teams and then publish, it's it feels like it flies by. So next year I'm gonna just enjoy it and just watch, but no, it was exciting, man. I think my favorite pick was Jahmyr Gibbs going 12. I was jumping up and down because I was really high on him, and that's that thing that we want our guys that we're high on getting drafted high. It kind of solidifies our belief that they are a good player when the NFL backs it up with a high draft pick. So there were a few players like that happened during the draft, and it was a lot of fun. I thought this was one of the better ones. Not a ton of trades as far as players getting involved, especially day one. But I thought it was exciting. I liked what I was seeing. How about you?
Yeah, man, it was awesome. I was thankfully I'm not one of these psychos that does a 3-day live stream, because A, no one would care to listen to me talk about the draft for 3 days straight, but B, it's insane. And so I was just kind of I was live tweeting and stuff like that, but I was really soaking in it as a fan, and it's just so crazy what the draft has become. I'm not gonna try and pretend I'm the old football guy, but I do remember when it was at Radio City Hall every year, and it was just kind of a low-key thing. You had the people booing the Jets pick and stuff like that, but now it's this whole, it's like a concert. It's this whole thing, so it was really fun to watch and really fun to experience.
I know. I kind of feel like when you before Coldplay was Coldplay, you'd have the people that were fans of Coldplay that saw them as this kind of underground band, and then they became huge, and it's I kind of felt that way a little bit with the draft, because I used to be the one. It used to come on early, It'd start Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and I think they would do 3 or 4 rounds day one, and then it was basically done over 2 days. And I kind of felt like I had an edge over my friends because they weren't watching the draft. Well, now everybody is watching. Everybody's following it on social media, so it's probably best this way, because it is fun to see it go to a different city. I got to go to Dallas a few years ago, the Saquon Barkley draft, and experience that. So no, I like how big it's become.
Yeah, it's a good time. So one of the best parts about the draft is now that we can talk about these guys from a legit perspective. We can talk about their landing spots as it relates to fantasy. And so what we're going to do on today's show, everyone, is we're going to go through the top 10 wide receivers that were selected from a draft capital perspective, talk about them at a high level, and then we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of ranking exercise specifically for dynasty. So I know a lot of people are doing their dynasty drafts right now, whether they're just rookie drafts or startup drafts. So we brought Steve on to give you guys the edge, give you guys some insights into how he's seeing these players from a dynasty perspective. So, Steve, without further ado, let's just start. We'll go from 10 to 1 in terms of draft capital. So we'll start with Jalin Hyatt the wide receiver from Tennessee that the Giants selected in round 3. What do you think about Jalin Hyatt?
So I wanted to be excited about Jalin Hyatt, but one of my co-hosts, my buddy Jesse, who played college football, he's like our college guy. He is all in on college football, and he kind of he made me a little nervous about basically the Tennessee program and the way that they run that offense. It's a little bit gimmicky. It's not your typical pro-style offense. I had him write something up for me because when I try to say it, I don't articulate it as well. So I had him send me a little bit of something. But the short version is it's a system that takes advantage of space and pace at a high school and college level. And not one QB or wide receiver has had great success in the NFL. The NFL has different hash marks, so essentially less space, and nobody runs at that pace at the NFL. QBs and wide receivers learn a limited route tree, so they come in not ready and not refined with an NFL route tree. So some of the guys, I was like, remind me of the list of some of the guys that have come out of that system. So here's a list of the system that coaches have produced. We've got Kendall Wright, who was okay kind of back in the day, Terrence Williams, RG3, Bryce Petty, Lachey Seastruck, Corey Coleman, Katie Cannon, Shock Linwood, Drew Lock, Gabe Davis, Hendon Hooker, Velus Jones Jr. So there's not a lot of success coming from that system, and I'm worried that Hyatt's going to be nothing more than like a situational deep threat tied to Daniel Jones.
Yeah, not exactly your who's who in terms of past prospects. I do agree with your buddy that the Tennessee offense is sort of like it's you can't really trust anything from it based on the way that they structure it. And the other thing too that's really interesting to think about is at the college level the hash marks are obviously further apart, and so it's almost a different game in terms of like what you can scheme up from an offensive perspective in terms of taking advantage of matchups. It seems like every highlight that I watch from Jalin Hyatt, he doesn't have anyone guarding him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think it was a lot of scheme stuff, but hey, let's think about this. Brian Daboll, who else do we want scheming things up other than Brian Daboll? He's a pretty sharp guy, and so definitely not going to have too much of what's the word here? Like a path, impeding his path to seeing the field with the Giants because they don't have a lot of great wide receivers. And so I think, he could be that Deshaun Jackson type that's able to just stretch the field, and we'll see what he's able to do at the pro level. Moving on to Tank Dell, also another third rounder there, drafted to Houston. So definitely interesting that he gets to be paired with C.J. Stroud there. What's your take on Tank Dell?
He was one of those guys that really looked very good at the Senior Bowl. I think he even left early because he showed so well early that he didn't even stick around for the game. My biggest pause with him is just his size. It's really that comes down to he's 5'8", 165 pounds. And we have just not seen that small of a wide receiver give too much success in the NFL. Some of the guys in the last 20 years that I could point to at that size that have had some success would be Jamison Crowder and Cole Beasley. So, maybe like some wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. And then, we're still waiting on guys like Rondale Moore, who's a similar comp. And it just hasn't happened for him. And he's even twice the athlete as Tank Dell. If you want to stretch a little bit, you could go Marquise Brown. They're kind of similar size. So in Marquise Brown, we know that his body has not held up that well at the NFL. Seems to be injured all the time. So, I do like that he went pick 69. Mm-hmm. That's exciting. Nice. And the competition.
That is exciting.
I didn't even mean to say it. But and the competition, I'm not, it's the Wild West down there as far as anybody in that wide receiver core could be the guy. So I like it in that aspect, but like big picture, bird's eye view, I tend to avoid these guys that have to be an outlier to really perform. So depending on how late he goes, but I have a feeling in your rookie drafts he's gonna go a little earlier than I'd want to take him.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do want to give a quick disclaimer. Speaking of bird's eye view, there are a ton of birds outside of my window right now, and so my cat is freaking out. She is just freaking out. So if you guys hear a bunch of whining going on and my computer screen gets all jumbled, don't be alarmed. That's the beauty of live recording. Tank Dell is so interesting. The landing spot. We don't think of Houston as being this premier destination for anyone on offense. But he, again, like you said, he doesn't have a lot of competition coming in. I think Nico Collins is really it. Somebody that we've gotten excited about, but
there's a lot of people still high on Mechie, but
that's a great point. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I did too. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. He's coming back from cancer, so I don't know exactly how quick he'll be to jump back into the. And the fact that he didn't play his rookie year, so he's essentially a rookie starting over this year. So we'll see.
One of the interesting things there, Stephen, maybe you could tell me this. I'm not positive, but is Mechie going to be able to participate in all the rookie mini camps?
I thought I had heard that he's ready to go, but I don't know what that means.
But I mean, as a second-year player, is he allowed to participate in the rookie mini camps?
The rookie mini camps.
Play?
I doubt it. I don't think you necessarily get like a redshirt year in the NFL, so that I would guess no.
Because I think that definitely helps out Tank Dell, like to be able to go to rookie mini camps with CJ and be able to develop that early chemistry. I think that's nothing to scoff at. I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit later with Jonathan Mingo too. But yeah, so Tank Dell, definitely an interesting guy. Moving on to Marvin Mims Jr., somebody that you'll be able to speak to quite knowledgeably. I know you're a big Broncos fan, and so interesting that the first offensive player taken in the Sean Payton era, they traded up to get this guy. So are you as excited as Sean Payton seems to be about Marvin Mims Jr.?
No, I don't think this was a good football move. We didn't need wide receiver. Mm-hmm. We've got KJ Hamler there, Tim Patrick there. He's going to be, as far as fantasy goes, he's going to be competing with Judy, Sutton, and Dulcich. So I think both for fantasy and for real life, I don't think this was a great move. Denver, we know how much they've given up to get Russell Wilson and to get Sean Payton. So trading even more away, like we should have been gathering picks, not trading up, So as far as, they went up and got him, knowing they didn't have that many picks, they still traded up to get him. So maybe you could be excited from that aspect. And I do like the player. I don't want it to sound like I don't like the player. I just, from like a fan standpoint, I didn't love the landing spot. But Mims, I mean, he broke out young. He had good yards per route run. He's athletic. So we'll see. But it's just hard for me to picture. It just feels like I'm down on all these receivers. Maybe it's the order we're going in. but that one in particular, especially if Russell Wilson, we need to see him even show that he can support three wide receivers, or one wide receiver at this point. I
was just gonna say, and on that point too, Steve. Like, I do think it's smart to not let our expectations get carried away. I know it's super fun and exciting to get all excited about these rookies. They're the new shiny toys. But this wasn't a strong wide receiver class, so I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, hey, I know this guy was the 8th wide receiver taken off the board. I still don't love him. He might be, at best, a wide receiver 3 in his NFL career. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with setting expectations like that. The one guy that expectations will likely get a little out of hand on, Rashee Rice, goes to the dream spot, Kansas City. Last year, Sky Moore was taken, I think, one pick after where Rashee Rice was taken.
Okay.
And Kansas City traded up to take Rice. I think he has some sort of connection with Mahomes. So what's your take on Rashee Rice? Do you think he's going to sort of be blown a little out of proportion here?
I'm going back and forth with him because part of me wants to go, I'm done with the Kansas City wide receiver experiments. We've seen Andy Reid since he's been there. I mean, I guess Dwayne Bowe was decent for a little while there. We know Tyreek Hill, but that's the one outlier. Like he's been amazing. But like Chris Conley, Mecole Hardman, you just mentioned Sky Moore, still waiting on these guys. So I'm a little pessimistic, but it's Patrick Mahomes and it's Andy Reid and it's a great offense. They got him at pick 55 was it? Yeah, pick 55. They traded up to get him, like you just said. He's a little bit bigger. He's not like a big wide receiver, but he's bigger than some of these other guys we mentioned.
Yeah. 6 foot 203.
Yeah, he's athletic, and he was probably, you could argue, the most productive wide receiver out of this draft class. At SMU, he was highly productive. Just this last year, he had over 1,300 receiving yards, 96 receptions, 10 touchdowns. So I'm going to always take a shot on Kansas City offensive playmakers. We've been burned. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the running back position. We've been burned by them before, but we know how good Mahomes is and how good this offense can be. So I'm fine taking a shot at him. Early second. Honestly, he's going to be going in the first round, probably mid to late first round in rookie drafts. And I'm not going to fault anyone for taking him there. I'll probably, if I can, take him there. As a Patrick Mahomes owner in Dynasty, I also have Sky Moore. I'll take a shot.
There you go. I love it. No, I mean, look, Sky Moore was taken in the mid to back half of the first round last year in rookie drafts, and so I can totally see a situation where Rashee Rice is going to be flying up draft boards.
Well, and Mecole Hardman too. A few years ago, he was like a round pick. I think in some startups rookie drafts was going ahead of like AJ Brown and DK Metcalf. So it just shows you how much power Patrick Mahomes has over fantasy.
Yep, rightfully so. He's pretty good.
Okay,
so moving on to Jayden Reed, one of the guys that I actually kind of liked quite a bit compared to sort of where the expert consensus had him ahead of the draft. He goes to Green Bay, solid draft capital. The conversation with him and Romeo Doubs is a little bit interesting, who's sort of going to be the number 2 behind Christian Watson. They brought in Musgrave too, I believe, at tight end. And so how do you feel about Jayden Reed as a prospect and now his landing spot here in Green Bay?
I like the landing spot. With Jordan Love, we're still waiting to see how good he can be. And the fact that Green Bay only gave him the 1-year extension says they're still wondering how good he can be. So with a lot of these wide receivers, my expectations aren't super high. But, one of the comps that I keep hearing with Reed is Stephon Diggs. He had an early breakout age. He's got decent size. He's athletic. This past season wasn't like super productive, but I know he looked really good at the Senior Bowl. And he really turned heads, was making a lot of plays. He's as a route runner, he seems super quick. Like on film, he looks good. So, yeah, I think we know what Christian Watson's going to be. He's going to be the deep threat that can house it on any play. And I think Reed competing with Doubs, I think he could be that guy. So I do like him. And the fact that, like you just said, he went so early, went pick 50, that means that they like what they see too. So that he'll be given more than fair shot to be productive in that offense.
Definitely. And quick side note, as I was looking up just sort of his profile, I saw all these guys are now born in the year 2000.
I know.
So that makes you feel old. That's not great.
Yeah. Well, I know you're younger than me. I don't like it because all these guys that are getting drafted now are after I graduated high school.
Oh,
so
gosh. They
were born after I graduated high school. So it's getting even more depressive because I'm picturing where I was in college when these guys were born. So that's depressing.
Yeah. Well, it just means you're wise.
We'll say that. We'll go with that.
Moving on to Jonathan Mingo, definitely similarly to Tank Dell, very interesting in the sense that he gets paired up with a great quarterback prospect in Bryce Young. So Jonathan Mingo, I love the idea of him going with Young, just because I think Young has such a safe floor. It's just pro-ready quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see if Jonathan Mingo can sort of evolve alongside Bryce Young, and he's going to have a great opportunity to learn from Adam Thielen, who's just an awesome veteran, and he's not going to have that much in his way. Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and Terrace Marshall, the only other wide receivers there of note. And so Jonathan Mingo, curious how you see him shaking out.
I like him. He, as far as like physical specimens, was probably the most exciting athletically. He's built like Anquan Bolden, but faster. He's 6'1", 226, ran a 4.46, had a 40-inch vertical, 129-inch broad jump. So this guy is uber athletic. Yeah. And he went second round, 8th pick. And you just mentioned the competition. Like, Adam Thielen's toast. Like, that's just he was cheap. He's a locker room guy. He'll be on the field, but that's good for Bryce Young. A lot of these moves were to help whichever quarterback they were going to draft, which ended up being Young. But I think this guy on the roster, I think he has the highest potential to be the guy. I'm not worried about any of these other guys. I think he can outproduce those guys. He's one of the guys of this list that we've been going through. I'm most excited about him of the guys we've mentioned so far.
Very cool. Very interesting. It's going to be an interesting conversation when we get to the tier talk, because these guys coming up, he might be creeping into that conversation. So next guy up, Jordan Addison goes to Minnesota. I think we're all pretty enthusiastic about that landing spot. Gets to play opposite of Justin Jefferson, obviously, and sort of that McVay-style offense. So he has the potential to sort of be Don't hate me for saying this.
Don't you do it. No, just kidding. Go
the
ahead.
Cooper Kupp of this offense.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. And, I mean, his college profile's better. So if you want to call him that, then sure. I actually wanted him to go to the Chargers. I like the idea of him staying in L.A. and playing for the Chargers. But I love this landing spot, too. I think this is great. I think he'll complement Justin Jefferson perfectly. We saw Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods finish as wide receiver 2s in that same system in L.A. I think these guys could do it too. You know, am I banking on him to finish as a wide receiver 1? No, but does he have the potential? Absolutely. I think we've seen Adam Thielen do really well in this offense, not in this offense, but with Justin Jefferson as well. And so, yeah, no, I'm very excited about it. I think this was probably my second favorite landing spot he could have gone to.
I love it. Definitely an interesting player. Definitely an exciting landing spot. Zay Flowers goes to Baltimore. Obviously, a lot better now that Lamar Jackson is staying, and a new offense now with new offensive coordinator coming in, prospectively more pass heavy. Zay Flowers, a lot of people were comparing to sort of Tyreek Hill. Maybe not comparing, but just saying like that's sort of the archetype that he's in. So, how do you feel about Zay Flowers going to Baltimore?
I probably did the thing that maybe you did as well. I bet a lot of people did it. Like Baltimore, you just kind of do because you just think run heavy. The scrambling quarterback doesn't usually support high-end wide receiver production, But I think Lamar Jackson's a little bit different. We saw Mark Andrews dominate with Lamar Jackson. And I think Zay Flowers, I'm warming up more to this landing spot. We saw Marquise Brown was a top 6 wide receiver with Lamar Jackson just a couple of years ago before Jackson ended up getting hurt. So I think that Flowers, he looks good. The guy he was super dominant at Boston College. 47% dominator rating, which I believe was the best in this draft class. So going to pick 22, I'm excited about him. I probably like him a little bit less than some of the other wide receivers, but he's right there. We'll get into the tiers here in a minute, but I like him a lot.
Yeah, I was listening to you on Faraz's podcast. You guys did a little post-draft analysis right after, and I did appreciate sort of the correlation to Marquise Brown and saying like, hey, if he can be at least some of what Marquise Brown was, he's due for a big fantasy season. And especially now with the new offensive program coming into Baltimore. And I just love Lamar Jackson. I think that guy's just a stud. He just inspires confidence. I don't think anybody can do wrong when Lamar Jackson's around, so I'm definitely excited about him.
Well, yeah, and think about with Todd Monk in there, he was the one when, at least for part of Jameis Winston's career, when Jameis Winston was just throwing it left and right to whoever was downfield, didn't matter who, but they were still throwing a ton. And we saw this happen with Josh Allen recently, where they added Stephon Diggs, and the script completely flipped. It went from a very run-heavy offense to a very pass-heavy offense. I could see Baltimore doing the same thing, especially given how much they paid Lamar Jackson. He's the highest-paid player in NFL history for the next 10 minutes. But but yeah, so you pay a guy that much, you don't limit what he's going to do with the ball in his hands. So I think he's going to be throwing a lot. 100%.
Okay, moving on to Quentin Johnston. Solid quarterback situation, obviously. And Quentin Johnston, people might forget, but at this time last year, people were talking about him as a top 10 potential pick. And so for him to drop back in sort of the draft and to pick number 21, I believe it was, with the Chargers, interesting to see him fall. It definitely has some concerns, but a lot of upside too. So how do you feel about Johnston and then also his landing spot in LA?
Well, I think you just talked about how last year people were very high on him, and it just feels like, especially with these guys that are more, and he actually wasn't even that, we think of him as like a good contested catch wide receiver because he's big, but he actually wasn't that good at contested catches. But I feel like we started to sour on some of these guys that maybe aren't as good at getting open, which probably for good reason. But I think he couldn't have landed in a better spot. Maybe Kansas City would have been better, but tied to Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen's 31 years old. For Dynasty, I love it because Keenan's going to be gone very soon, probably next year, wouldn't shock me. And then Mike Williams, he's got 2 years left on his deal, so I don't think he's as good as the other receivers he was drafted around. I would put him behind those guys, but given where he landed, I kind of have him right up there with those guys because he's going to be tied to Justin Herbert for the entirety of his rookie contract at the very least, So I think he could put up. I think what we see out of Mike Williams, wouldn't be shocked if that's the kind of stuff we see out of him. If he could stay healthy, probably a little boom or bust. I wouldn't be shocked, if we see some of that. But could win you weeks, might lose you some weeks. But you're going to have those big games where he's going to win you some matchups.
Definitely. Okay, so last but not least, sort of the cream of the crop here, Jaxon Smith-Njigba goes to Seattle, which was kind of a disappointing landing spot. I know on draft night when Seattle's up there and they make the pick and it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and you're like, So how are you feeling about him now as the third member of the Seattle wide receiver corps?
Well, over at the Fantasy Guides team, not just on our podcast, but I have some other guys that I work with that help out with stuff. We hope Andrew, who I work with, he said he hopes Pete Carroll steps on a Lego because not like anybody that had Tyler Lockett probably really frustrated. Like I know my brother has Tyler Lockett in Dynasty, and he was like, no, because there's such an overlapping skill set there. Let's not even talk about the running back situation because that's the part we're most heated about. But yeah, I think when he went to Seattle, we all kind of went, because it's Pete Carroll. He's never going to be a very pass-heavy team. As long as Pete Carroll's there, there's going to be some seasons where they get a little bit higher in pass rate, but they're a slow-paced team. They were one of the slowest-paced teams last year. They're just not going to pass enough, and I still really believe in the talent of JSN, but there's still Geno who has question marks. So I still would probably have him as my number one out of this draft class, but I think he's not in his own tier, which I had him in his own tier prior to this. So I think it kind of brings the other guys closer to him. If you want a comparison that maybe you could draw some optimism from, CeeDee Lamb, when he first got drafted, and Amari Cooper was there in Dallas, and Michael Gallup, and then Dak Prescott, who not everybody was completely sold on. I think we all did a little bit of that, But look at just 2 years later, Amari was gone, and CeeDee Lamb's like one of the best receivers in football. So I still think that could be a possibility there. But yeah, I did a little bit of a when he got drafted there. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, hard not to. And I appreciate that perspective on the CeeDee Lamb front because in Dynasty, obviously situations change so often year to year. Like, who would have thought, let's think of a good example here. Who would have thought the Seahawks last year would have been a playoff team?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think my perspective and my take on sort of the Dynasty drafting process is just get the guys you like, take the talent. If you can get them with a great quarterback, awesome. But take the guys that are talented. So let's get into this. You alluded to it just now, your tiered rankings. I want to talk quickly about why it's important to do tiered rankings when it comes to Dynasty rookie drafts, and it's very similar to the real NFL draft, right? Because if you're looking at two guys in tier 1, you have the 101 pick and then the 102 pick. You got two guys both there that you value equally. Then you should obviously try and trade for the 102 because it's going to cost you way less draft capital.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of the tiered ranking system when it comes to Dynasty rookie draft. So really, really pumped to have you on, Steve, and give your take on these wide receiver tiers. And I know you just alluded to it. You had Jaxon Smith-Njigba in tier 1. Who do you have alongside him in tier 1?
Well, not shockingly, it's the other receivers that went 4 in a row. I was talking about updating my draft guide, while the draft was going on.
Yeah.
And it was nice when you'd have like a lineman and some defensive players go because it'd give me some time between picks. This was like murderous row when I got to this point because I could not keep up. It was like receiver. So, I've got JSN. I don't have him in his own tier anymore, though, because I did like the other guys, too. I thought I kind of had him in his own wide receiver mini tier prior to the draft, but now I like him number 1. Now, my rankings that I'm looking at, it is a consensus with my team. So these aren't fully mine. So I'm kind of like shooting from the hip a little bit as I'm looking over these. Mm-hmm. But I would put in that next tier Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, and Zay Flowers. I probably like Johnston a little more than Addison, just being tied to Herbert. But I'm not going to say, definitely take him at 2. I think that tier of Addison, Johnston, and Flowers, whichever one of those guys you like the most. I like Johnston and then Addison and then Flowers, but I think you'd probably agree they're very close.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Stephen, just from like a strategy perspective. If you're sitting there at the 107, let's call it, and you're staring at Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but then you also have those guys behind you, and somebody comes to you with the 1010 and says, hey, I'll give you, a future second rounder to move up 3 spots, it would be. Just based off your tiered rankings, you're comfortable doing that to pick up the extra draft capital in your rookie drafts, and then like take the guy that you have third in your ranks but in the same tier?
You're saying trade a second, like if I have pick 10, moving up to 7 to
No. You have pick 7, and
Yeah.
then somebody offers you pick 10 for a future second. You know what I mean? Are you
Gotcha.
comfortable moving back and taking Addison instead of a Jaxon Smith-Njigba?
Yes, I would be. All right, now, sorry, are you doing this as Superflex tiers?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter for wide receivers' sake, but just in that example, yeah, it would have been Superflex, probably.
Gotcha. Because I was like looking at my rankings and I was going, wait a minute, like depends on where it was. Yes, yeah. I would be fine doing that trade back for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's so important for new dynasty players to really understand, is that, like, look, getting those future draft picks is very important. Obviously, you can trade them for current players, veteran players. Say you need like a 2-week replacement, you could trade that second rounder for somebody to plug into your lineup. And so, okay, so that's tier 1. Who do you have in tier 2?
In tier 2, hold on, I filtered it by, I have a Superflex filter, so okay. I was pulling it up just so we're a little bit more on the same page for this.
Yeah.
In that tier 2, I would probably go. I like Rice and I like Mingo. Probably Rice above Mingo would be.
Okay.
I kind of want to put Rice in his own little tier here, though, just because I think that the competition in Kansas City. So I think he and Mingo are very comparable. Kansas City has Travis Kelce. That's the big trump card there. But as far as the wide receivers, I'm not too worried about the competition for either of them. It's just that one's Patrick Mahomes, one's Bryce Young, who could be very good, but he's got question marks as well. So I'd probably put Rice in his own little kind of tier right after Zay Flowers. And then I'd go Jonathan Mingo. There's a big tier after that.
Yeah.
I think Mingo I'd probably have in my own little mini tier, and then maybe like your Marvin Mims, Josh Downs, Jayden Reed, Jalin Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Tank Dell. It gets really flat pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so just so I can understand properly, and so the viewers can understand properly, in sort of a 1A we have JSN still, and then in 1B we have Johnston, Flowers, and Addison.
Yep.
In 2 we have Rice on his own, and then in 3 we have Mingo, and then 4 is where it gets flat.
Yes, and then it starts to really flatten out for me because I think these are a lot of dart throws coming up. Tank Dell's going to be ranked a lot higher, but I could argue a player like Charlie Jones going to Cincinnati, with Tyler Boyd, probably he's a free agent next year, so Charlie Boyd could step into that Tyler Boyd role, and you can get Charlie Jones way later, and he was highly, I actually kind of like him more than Tank Dell. So it gets flat is kind of my point, after this.
Definitely. Well, hey, we'll make sure to post the tiered ranks in the show notes after this. And then, Steve, if you're cool with it, give the people a little intel on where they can find you. I know you're doing some awesome work with your draft guides and obviously Instagram. So put the people onto what you're doing. You work your tail off, man, and you put out some awesome content. So I want people to find out about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, so at Fantasy Guides on Instagram, I'm posting content daily. Right now, my biggest push is I've got a dynasty guide, I've got a redraft guide. When the season starts, it'll be a season guide. You can get it all in kind of one package on my website, shopfantasyguides.com. I'm still updating rookies. I'm building a team, but I'm still a little bit of a one-man show when it comes to some of the back-end stuff. So I'm sure you can relate a little bit, Will, of a lot of late nights putting in. So I'm like updating, draft capital and things like that. But no, that's what I'm working on right now. People are still wanting to know more about these rookies since the draft. So I'm going to be hammering dynasty and rookies on, like I said, both my Instagram and on my website for the next couple weeks.
Awesome, dude. Well, I love it. And I appreciate you coming on. This has been an awesome conversation, Steve. Thank you so much. Everybody, go follow Steve on Instagram. Follow his podcast every Tuesdays. Couldn't recommend it anymore. Steve, thanks so much for hopping on, man.
Of course, Will. Thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. See you guys.